Marcus Webb pushed his cleaning cart down the empty corridors of Orbital Station Zenith. The fluorescent lights hummed softly above him, and his footsteps echoed against the metal walls. It was 3 in the morning and the station was mostly quiet. This was his favorite time to work. No crowds, no important politicians rushing past him like he was invisible, just him and his mop bucket. He'd been working the night shift for 3 years now. Most people would find it lonely, but Marcus didn't mind. The station was a massive diplomatic hub where aliens from all over the galaxy came to negotiate treaties and trade deals. During the day, the hallways buzzed with activity. Translators chattered, important meetings happened behind closed doors, and everyone acted like the fate of the universe depended on their next conversation. At night, though, things were different. Peaceful. Marcus rounded the corner toward the eastern wing and stopped. Something was wrong. A sound cut through the usual silence, high-pitched and desperate. It was crying. Not just one voice but several, all wailing at once. The sound made his chest tight. He'd heard plenty of strange noises working on an alien space station, but this was different. This wasn't some weird machinery or atmospheric processor acting up. This was the sound of children in serious distress. He followed the noise to the Zenith childcare facility. The place was supposed to be top of the line, where rich and powerful aliens left their kids while they worked on their important business. Marcus had cleaned the facility plenty of times, but he'd never heard anything like this chaos before. Through the transparent doors, he could see 4 small creatures crying their hearts out. They were Croth cubs about the size of house cats, with fur that looked like it was made of tiny crystals. Even through their tears, their fur caught the light and shimmered. But right now they just looked miserable. 3 Croth caretakers were moving around frantically, trying everything they could think of. One was adjusting temperature controls on the cubs' containment pods. Another was releasing some kind of calming scent into the air. The third was singing what Marcus guessed was a lullaby in their clicking, musical language. Nothing was working. In fact, the cubs seemed to be crying even harder. Marcus stood at the doorway, completely forgetting about the hallway he was supposed to be mopping. The biggest of the 3 caretakers noticed him standing there and made a sharp gesture with her crystalline paw. "Move along, human. This is not your concern." "I can hear them from 3 corridors away," Marcus said quietly. He wasn't trying to be rude, but those cries were breaking his heart. "Where are their parents?" The caretaker's fur rippled with stress. Ambassador Threll and his mate were called to an emergency summit on their home planet. The other cubs' parents are stuck in crucial negotiations that cannot be interrupted. "We have tried everything in our protocols. The cubs refused to settle." Another figure emerged from the back office. It was Director Sharla, the facility's head administrator. She was older, her crystalline fur had lost some of its shine, and her eyes were cold and hard. She looked at Marcus like he was a bug that had crawled where it didn't belong. "Janitor Webb," she said, her voice like ice. "Your services are not required here. I just thought maybe I could help." "You thought incorrectly." Sharla stepped forward, blocking his view of the crying cubs. "We are trained professionals. We do not require assistance from maintenance staff. Return to your duties." Marcus hesitated. One of the smallest cubs had been crying so long that it was shaking with exhaustion. Every few seconds, it would gasp for air between sobs. The sound reminded him of his nephew back on Earth. His sister's little boy used to cry just like that when he was scared and his parents weren't around. "With respect, ma'am, those kids have been crying for over an hour now. I can hear them throughout the entire section of the station." Sharla's eyes narrowed. "They're not kids. They are Croth cubs of noble lineage, and they will be cared for according to proper Croth methodology. Leave now before I report your interference to Controller Vex." Marcus looked one more time at the smallest cub. Its little body was trembling, and its cries had gotten weaker, more defeated. Then he nodded slowly and pushed his cart away. But as he walked down the corridor, the crying followed him. It bounced off the metal walls, seeming to get louder instead of quieter the farther he went. He tried to focus on his work. He mopped floors until they shined. He emptied waste bins. He checked air filters and replaced a few that were getting clogged. But every single task brought him past that facility. Every time he walked by, the crying continued. Through the windows, he could see the caretakers getting more and more desperate. Their movements were less coordinated now. They were exhausted. At 3 in the morning, during his scheduled 15-minute break, Marcus sat in the tiny janitor's lounge with a cup of coffee. He didn't drink it. He just held the cup and stared at the wall. The crying had changed now. It wasn't angry anymore. It was defeated. Hopeless. Somehow, that was even worse than the screaming had been. His supervisor's voice crackled over his communication unit. Webb, what's the holdup? You're 40 minutes behind on your route tonight. Sorry, Greg. There's a situation in the childcare facility. The cubs are in bad shape and... Not your problem, Marcus. His supervisor sounded tired. You're paid to clean floors, not to worry about alien kids. Get back to work. Yeah. Okay. Marcus stood up, leaving the full cup of coffee on the table. He should have gone to the next section on his cleaning route. He knew that. But instead, his feet carried him back toward the childcare facility. Through the doors he could see that Director Charla had left. Only 2 caretakers remained now, and they looked like they were about to collapse from exhaustion. The smallest cub had finally gone silent. Not peaceful silent. Just completely spent, lying there with no energy left to cry. Marcus knew he should walk away. This wasn't his job. These weren't even his species. He didn't know anything about Kroth physiology or their customs. He could get fired for this. Maybe even kicked off the station and sent back to Earth. But then he thought about his grandmother. She'd raised 5 kids and helped raise a dozen grandchildren. She used to say something that stuck with him his whole life. Marcus, baby, a child's cry is the same in every language. Means I need you. And decent people answer that call. Doesn't matter if it's convenient. Doesn't matter if it's your job. You answer. Marcus took a deep breath. His hand hovered over the door control for a moment. Then he pushed it and the door slid open with a soft hiss. The 2 remaining Kroth caretakers turned to look at him. They were too tired to even look angry. They just looked desperate and defeated. Behind them 4 tiny cubs lay in their pots, their crystalline fur dull and lifeless. The smallest one's eyes were half closed, her tiny chest moving with shallow, rapid breaths. I know what the director said, Marcus told them quietly. But I'm here anyway. Those cubs need help and you 2 look like you're about to fall over. So either you can call security and have me thrown out or you can let me try something different. Your choice. The 2 caretakers looked at each other. Then they looked at the cubs. Then the older male caretaker, his face lined with exhaustion and worry, stepped aside. Do what you can, human, he said. At this point we have nothing left to lose. The 2 Kroth caretakers watched Marcus nervously as he stepped inside. The younger one, a female with matted crystalline fur, moved protectively toward the containment pods. Her exhaustion fought with her instinct to guard the cubs. The older male just stared at him with hollow eyes, too tired to care anymore. Marcus kept his movements slow and non-threatening. Up close, the cubs looked even worse than he'd thought. Their fur had completely lost its shimmer and looked dull and lifeless. Their small bodies trembled with each breath they took. The smallest one, the one that had gone silent, just lay there with her eyes half closed, barely moving at all. We have attempted every Kroth soothing technique, the male caretaker said. His voice cracked with exhaustion and desperation. Temperature regulation, nutritional supplements, pheromone therapy, ancestral lullabies, pressure adjustments, light manipulation. We have tried everything. Nothing works. The cubs always respond to these methods. Always. We do not understand what is wrong. Marcus knelt down beside the smallest cub's pod. Maybe that's the problem right there, he said quietly. Maybe they need something different. Something that's not in your handbook. The female caretaker made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. You are human. You know nothing of Kroth physiology or our child-rearing protocols. What could you possibly do that we cannot? You're right. I don't know anything about Kroth biology or your procedures. Marcus looked up at them. But I know scared kids when I see them. And those cubs are terrified. Can I try something? If it doesn't work, I'll leave. I promise. The 2 caretakers looked at each other for a long moment. Finally, the male gestured toward the control panel. Her pod can be opened manually. But if you harm her in any way, human or not, I will personally ensure you never work on this station again. I won't hurt her. I swear. Marcus carefully pressed the control that opened the clear enclosure. The tiny cub didn't even react. She was too exhausted to care what happened anymore. As gently as he possibly could, Marcus slid his rough, calloused hands under her small body and lifted her out. She was surprisingly light, maybe only a few pounds. Her crystalline fur felt soft as silk against his skin. He could feel her tiny heart beating way too fast, and her breathing was quick and shallow like she couldn't quite catch her breath. Marcus settled himself down on the floor with his back against the wall. He cradled the cub against his chest, one hand supporting her small head, the other resting gently on her back. Then he started to rock. Back and forth, slowly and steadily, the same way he'd rocked his nephew 1,000 times back on Earth. What are you doing? The younger caretaker whispered, like she was afraid to speak too loud. Something humans figured out a really long time ago, Marcus explained softly, never stopping the rocking motion. Human babies spend 9 months inside their mother, constantly moving, always hearing her heartbeat. When they're born, everything suddenly goes still and quiet. It scares them. So we rock them. It reminds them of being safe inside the womb. The movement, the heartbeat, the warmth. It tells them they're okay. He began to hum. It wasn't really a song at first, just a low, steady sound. Then it became a melody, an old lullaby his grandmother used to sing to him when he was small. He couldn't remember all the words anymore, but that didn't matter. The words weren't important. What mattered was the rhythm, the steady and predictable sound that said everything's okay, you're safe, someone's here with you. The small cub in his arms stirred just a little bit. Her breathing got slightly deeper, slightly slower. It wasn't much, but it was something. The two Croft caretakers stood completely frozen, watching in stunned silence. Marcus just kept doing what he was doing. Rocking slowly. Humming softly. Letting the cub feel his heartbeat through his chest. Minutes ticked by. The other 3 cubs were still whimpering, but their cries had gotten quieter. They could sense something changing with their sister. Then the small cub's eyes opened all the way for the first time. She looked up at Marcus with eyes like liquid gold, studying his strange face. He smiled down at her and kept humming, kept rocking. Her tiny paw reached up and touched his chin, her soft pads exploring this weird creature that was holding her. Marcus could feel the moment it happened. Her whole body relaxed against him. The trembling stopped. Her breathing evened out and got deeper. Her eyes started to drift closed, fighting it at first, then finally giving in. Within 10 minutes, she was sound asleep, curled up against his chest with one small paw clutching his uniform shirt. Impossible, the younger caretaker breathed. Her own eyes were wide with shock. She has not slept in 14 hours. 14 hours of constant crying. How did you do that? The male caretaker had tears running down his furry face. What did you do that we could not? We tried everything. Everything in our training, everything in our protocols. What do you know that we do not? Marcus looked down at the sleeping cub, so peaceful now. I didn't do anything special. I just listened to what she needed instead of what a protocol said she should need. She didn't need fancy temperature controls or special scents. She just needed to feel safe. To feel like someone was there with her. He looked up at the 2 exhausted caretakers. Your turn. Pick up one of the others and do exactly what I just did. Don't think about Croft methods or procedures. Just hold them close. Rock them gently. Hum to them. Let them feel that they're not alone. The female caretaker hesitated, then slowly approached one of the pods. She lifted out a slightly larger cub, the one who'd been crying the second longest. At first, she held him stiffly and awkwardly, like she was afraid she'd do it wrong. The cub continued to whimper. Relax, Marcus said softly. You're all tense and he can feel it. Take a deep breath. Think about how you'd comfort someone you love. That's all this is. Just comfort. Just being there. She took a shaky breath and pulled the cub closer to her chest. Her posture softened. Following Marcus's example, she started to rock. Then she began to hum, a different tune than Marcus's, something from her own childhood maybe. The cub's desperate cries turned into confused little sniffles. Then those got quieter too. The male caretaker needed less encouragement. He picked up another cub with more confidence, holding the small body close. Soon both of them were rocking and humming. The facility that had been filled with heartbreaking wails for hours slowly fell into a blessed, peaceful quiet. Only one cub was still crying now, and even those cries had gotten softer and less panicked. Marcus looked at them and smiled. See? You're naturals. You already knew how to do this. You just forgot. This is not in any childcare manual I have ever studied, the male caretaker said. Wonder filled his voice as the cub in his arms started to doze off. In all my years of training, no one ever taught us this. Some things don't need manuals or training, Marcus said. They just need heart. They need someone willing to. The door slammed open so hard it bounced off the wall. Director Charla stood in the doorway, her crystalline fur standing on end with pure rage. Behind her was Controller Vex, the station's administrator. He was a Zenti, tall and insect-like, with huge compound eyes that glittered coldly in the light. His presence meant serious trouble. What is the meaning of this? Charla's voice was barely controlled fury. Marcus met her angry stare without flinching. The sleeping cub was still cradled against his chest, snoring softly. The meaning, ma'am, is that these cubs are finally sleeping. After hours of crying, they're finally peaceful. You're welcome. Controller Vex's compound eyes fixed on the scene. His mandibles clicked together as he processed what he was seeing. The two junior caretakers stood frozen, still holding the cubs they'd just gotten to sleep. The fourth cub, sensing the tension in the room, started to whimper again. Marcus held his breath. He'd just broken about a dozen rules. He was in a restricted area. He'd interfered with trained professionals. He'd handled the children of one of the most powerful ambassadors in the galaxy without permission. Any one of those things could get him fired. All of them together could get him arrested. But as he looked down at the tiny, peaceful face of the cub sleeping against his heart, Marcus knew he'd do it all over again. Some rules were worth breaking. Retried. Marcus expected to be dragged out of the facility immediately. He expected shouting, threats, maybe even security guards. But Controller Vex just stood there, his massive compound eyes moving from the sleeping cubs to the exhausted caretakers, then back to Marcus. The silence stretched out uncomfortably. The male caretaker, whose name Marcus had learned was Tom, spoke up before anyone else could. His voice was tired but firm. Controller, the cubs were in severe distress for over 4 hours. We followed every standard protocol. Nothing worked. The human did something we had not considered, and now they are finally resting. Director Sharla's fur bristled even more. The human violated restricted areas and performed unauthorized procedures on the offspring of Ambassador Threll. This is grounds for immediate termination and possible criminal charges. The cubs are sleeping, Tom said, his voice stronger now. For the first time since their parents left. Look at them, Director. Actually look at them. Sharla did look, and something flickered across her face. An emotion Marcus couldn't quite identify. The smallest cub in his arms was snoring softly now, her crystalline fur already starting to regain some of its natural shimmer. She looked peaceful. Content. Safe. Controller Vex tilted his head in that unsettling way insect-like aliens did when they were thinking hard about something. Describe your methodology, human. In detail. Marcus carefully explained while he demonstrated, never stopping the gentle rocking motion. He talked about how human babies needed rhythmic movement and soft sounds. How they responded to warmth and heartbeats. How sometimes the simplest solution was just being there, providing comfort and presence. I figured if it works for human babies, maybe it would work for cubs too. Turns out, being scared and needing someone to care might be pretty universal across species. Unscientific. Unproven. Completely unbefitting this facility's reputation, Sharla declared, but her voice had lost some of its edge. Controller, I must insist that we take action against. The door chimed, interrupting her. Ambassador Threll himself entered the room, and Marcus's stomach dropped. The Croth diplomat was massive, easily 7 feet tall, with fur that sparkled like diamonds. His presence filled the entire doorway. His eyes went immediately to his smallest daughter, still sleeping peacefully in Marcus's arms. I received an emergency notification that my cubs were in extreme distress, Threll said, his voice deep and rumbling. I left critical summit negotiations and came as quickly as I could. I was prepared for the worst. He stopped, staring at the scene. But they are sleeping. How is this possible? Ambassador, I sincerely apologize for this human's interference in proper procedures, Sharla began, but Threll held up one massive paw to silence her. My daughter is sleeping, he said again, like he couldn't quite believe it. He moved toward Marcus slowly, almost reverently. May I? Marcus very carefully transferred the small cub to her father's enormous paws. Threll held her so gently, cradling her close to his chest. His eyes closed and Marcus could see his whole body relax. 14 hours, she cried. I felt every moment of her distress through our parental bond, but I could not leave the summit. The fate of trade routes affecting billions of lives depended on those negotiations. But every second I was there, I felt her fear and pain. His voice cracked with emotion. Thank you, human. Whatever your name is, thank you from the depths of my heart. Marcus Webb, sir. I'm just the night janitor. Threll looked at him with an intensity that made Marcus shift uncomfortably. You are the person who comforted my child when I could not be there. You gave her peace when trained professionals could not. He turned to Controller Vex. This human is to be commended, not punished. Whatever recognition he requires, whatever compensation, provide it immediately. Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus tried to return to his normal routine. Mopping floors, emptying trash bins, checking air filtration systems. But the story had spread through the station like wildfire. Everyone was talking about the janitor who could calm any upset alien child with some kind of magic human technique. The requests started coming almost immediately. A Vexian diplomat named Riley approached him nervously one evening while he was cleaning a corridor. She had feathers instead of fur and a crest that fluttered when she was anxious. "Please, Mr. Webb. My hatchlings will not settle in the station's low gravity. The caretakers say it is normal adjustment period, but they have been crying for 3 days straight. I have not slept. I cannot focus on my work." Marcus visited her quarters during his lunch break. The 3 hatchlings looked like baby birds about the size of chickens, covered in fluffy down. They huddled miserably in a corner, chirping in distress. Their wings were not fully developed yet, and in the station's artificial gravity, they could not quite fly or walk properly. They looked confused and frightened. Marcus watched them for a few minutes, thinking. Then he asked Riley if she had a fan. She found a small one, and he set it on the lowest setting, angling it so a gentle breeze ruffled their downy feathers. The hatchlings immediately stopped chirping. Their little heads tilted curiously, and they spread their tiny wings slightly. "Baby birds on Earth calm down when they feel air movement," Marcus explained. "It reminds them of flying, of wind under their wings. I thought maybe your hatchlings would respond the same way." Riley watched in amazement as her babies began preening contentedly in the artificial breeze, making soft, happy chirping sounds. "You have saved my sanity, Mr. Webb. Possibly my career as well. I cannot negotiate treaties when I have not slept in 3 days and can barely think straight." The next request came from a Matharian trade delegate. Matharians looked like jellyfish that lived in water-filled environment suits. His babies, tiny translucent larvae called polyps, were not eating properly in their care tank. Marcus watched them float listlessly for about 5 minutes. Then he grabbed a stylus from the desk and gently created ripple patterns in their water. The polyps immediately perked up, swimming after the ripples with what looked like curiosity or excitement. "I used to do this with my nephew in the bathtub back on Earth," Marcus told the grateful father. "Babies like patterns. Predictable things they can watch and follow. It makes the world feel less random and scary to them." Within 2 weeks, Marcus had helped 17 different species with their children. He calmed Quarian pups by creating small vibrations they could sense through their sensitive antennae. He soothed Draymarian young by maintaining steady eye contact, which in their culture meant "you see me and I am safe with you." He even helped with a Thesian child who refused to sleep by simply sitting nearby and reading aloud. The child did not understand English, but the steady rhythm of Marcus's voice provided comforting background noise that their species naturally found soothing. He did not use fancy technology or quote scientific research. He just watched each child carefully, figured out what they might need, and tried things that made sense based on simple observation and empathy. Then on a Thursday afternoon, Controller Vex summoned him to his office. Marcus expected praise, maybe even a bonus or a promotion. Instead, he walked into a room full of department heads, all looking uncomfortable and avoiding eye contact. "Mr. Webb," Controller Vex began, his translator making his voice sound emotionless and flat. "Your recent activities have created significant procedural irregularities that we must address." Marcus felt his stomach sink. "Sir?" A Zenti administrator he had never seen before pulled up a holographic display showing a long list of violations. "You are employed as a maintenance technician, grade 3. Your job duties include sanitation, minor repairs, and facility upkeep. They do not include childcare services, consultation with diplomatic personnel, or interfacing with foreign dignitaries." Another administrator added, "In the past 2 weeks, you have violated 12 restricted area protocols, performed 17 unauthorized interventions with alien miners, and utilized station resources without proper requisition forms or approval." "I was just helping scared kids," Marcus said quietly. "You were operating far outside your authorized job parameters," Controller Vex corrected him. "This creates serious liability issues for the station. Insurance complications. Legal exposure. The Childcare Workers Guild has filed a formal complaint about uncertified personnel performing duties that their members are trained and licensed for." Marcus looked around the room. Director Charla sat in the corner, her expression unreadable. When their eyes met, she looked away quickly. "So what happens now?" Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer. "You are firing me?" "We are clarifying your role and responsibilities." Vex's mandibles clicked together uncomfortably. "You are to cease all childcare activities immediately and return exclusively to your assigned maintenance duties. Any future requests for your assistance with children are to be declined and redirected through proper official channels. Is this understood?" Marcus thought about the Vexian hatchlings finally sleeping peacefully in their gentle artificial breeze. About the Croth cubs who had stopped crying. About the Matharian polyps now eating and growing properly. About all the scared, confused children who just needed someone to see them as children instead of diplomatic complications or protocol problems. Understood, sir, Marcus said quietly. I will stick to mopping floors from now on. Retried. Marcus kept his head down and his mouth shut for exactly 5 days. He mopped floors until they gleamed. He emptied every trash receptacle on schedule. He checked air filters and replaced the ones that were clogged. He did his job and nothing more. When he walked past the childcare facility and heard the occasional crying, he forced himself to keep walking. It was not his problem anymore. He had been told very clearly to stay in his lane. On the 6th day, everything changed. The station-wide emergency alert chimed at 4 in the morning, jerking Marcus awake from restless sleep in his tiny quarters. The automated voice was calm but firm. Medical emergency level 3. All personnel to standby status. His personal communication unit buzzed a few seconds later with a message from his supervisor. Webb, get down to the medical bay immediately. They need environmental systems checked. Possible contamination situation. When Marcus arrived at the medical bay, it was complete chaos. Doctors from 4 different alien species were moving frantically around a sealed intensive care unit. Through the transparent walls, Marcus could see a small figure lying on a bed. A child, though unlike any species he had ever seen before. The being looked almost see-through, translucent like frosted glass, with glowing patterns flickering weakly under its skin. What is wrong with the air handlers? Marcus asked Jennifer, one of the human doctors on duty. She had always been friendly to him during his regular cleaning shifts. Jennifer grabbed his arm, her face pale and stressed. Nothing is wrong with the air. Marcus, I lied to get you down here. I had to get you past the restrictions somehow. She pulled him aside, away from the other medical staff. We are losing that child in there and we do not know why. Nothing we do is working. Through the clear walls, Marcus watched the small being move weakly, its glowing patterns dimming and flickering like a dying light bulb. What species is that? Keltharian. Extremely rare. There are maybe only a few thousand of them in the entire galaxy. Jennifer's voice dropped to almost a whisper. That is Ambassador Krell's infant son. He is about 2 months old by our calendar. She looked like she might cry. Marcus, everything is wrong with him. He will not eat. He will not sleep. He barely moves anymore. We have run every scan we have. Everything comes back normal. Physically, there is absolutely nothing wrong with him. Then what is causing this? We do not know. Keltharian physiology is barely documented. There are almost no medical records for their young. We are doing our absolute best with standard procedures for young aliens, but nothing is helping. He has been getting worse for 6 days now. Jennifer met his eyes meaningfully. Since the exact day that Controller Vex ordered you to stop helping with children. Marcus felt his heart sink into his stomach. You think this is connected to that? I think that child needs something we are not trained to provide. Something that is not in our medical textbooks or protocols. Jennifer glanced back at the intensive care unit. Ambassador Krell is threatening to withdraw from every single treaty negotiation the Keltharians have with humans and the Alliance. He says if we let his son die through our incompetence, his people will never trust any of us again. Controller Vex is desperate, Marcus. Desperate enough to ignore his own directive if you can somehow help. Jennifer, I do not know anything about Keltharian children. I have never even seen one before today. You did not know anything about Croth cubs either, but you saved them. She squeezed his arm. Please, Marcus. That baby is dying and we are out of options. Marcus stared at the small, fading light inside the intensive care unit. The being's bioluminescent patterns were beautiful swirls of blue and green, but they were getting dimmer by the minute, like stars going out one by one. What about his parents? Where are they? Krell has not left his son's side for 4 straight days. He is in there right now. Jennifer gestured toward a tall figure slumped in a chair beside the small bed. He has destroyed 2 pieces of expensive medical equipment in frustration and fired 3 specialist doctors. But when I carefully mentioned your name, he said yes immediately. He is willing to try anything at this point. Marcus took a deep breath and walked into the intensive care unit. The environmental controls automatically adjusted the atmosphere to create the specific conditions Keltharians needed to breathe comfortably. Ambassador Krell looked up and Marcus barely recognized him. The diplomat's normally perfect appearance was completely disheveled. His translucent skin looked dull and lifeless with grief and exhaustion. Human Marcus, Krell said through his translator implant. His voice sounded hollow and defeated. They tell me you help children when others cannot. That you have gifts our medical science does not possess. I do not have any gifts, sir. I just try to help however I can. Can you tell me about your son? Krell's voice broke as he spoke. His name translates poorly to your language. The closest meaning would be light of my joy. He is my firstborn child. My only child. He was healthy, vibrant, endlessly curious about everything. Then we came to this station for negotiations, and he began to fade like a dying star. The doctors keep assuring me their equipment is flawless and their techniques are the best available. They do not seem to understand that I am watching my son die right before my eyes, and all their flawless equipment means nothing. Marcus approached the small bed slowly. Light of my joy looked impossibly fragile, his small body almost weightless looking. His glowing patterns flickered irregularly, sometimes bright for a moment, then fading to almost nothing. May I hold him, Ambassador? Krell hesitated for a long moment, then very carefully lifted his son and placed the infant in Marcus's arms. The child was light as air itself, warm but not quite solid, like holding a hologram that had somehow gained just enough physical form to be touched. His large, luminous eyes opened briefly, looked at Marcus without recognition or interest, then closed again with what seemed like tired resignation. Marcus sat down in the chair beside the bed and started doing what felt natural. He began to rock, slowly and gently, the same rhythm that had worked with the Croth cubs and so many others. Light of my joy did not respond at first. Marcus started humming softly, letting the vibrations travel from his chest into the small being he held. Minutes crawled by. Then an hour. Marcus kept rocking without stopping, kept humming that old lullaby his grandmother had taught him decades ago. He occasionally adjusted how he held the infant to make sure he was comfortable and secure. Then he noticed something important. Every single time he stopped humming, even for a few seconds, the bioluminescent patterns dimmed just a little bit more. When he started humming again, they stabilized. Over the next 72 hours, Marcus barely left the intensive care unit. He slept sitting up in that uncomfortable chair, still holding Light of my joy against his chest. He ate with one hand when Jennifer brought him food, never once putting the infant down for more than a few minutes. He talked to the child constantly, not in any language the baby could possibly understand, but in soft, rhythmic tones that conveyed one simple message. You are not alone. Someone is here. You matter. Hey there, little guy. I have got you. You are safe right here. That is right, just rest. I'm not going anywhere. You hear that heartbeat? That is mine, and it is going to keep beating right here next to you. You are okay. Everything is going to be okay. Ambassador Krell stayed too, watching at first with desperate hope that slowly transformed into wonder as his son began to improve. The bioluminescent patterns grew steadier hour by hour, pulsing with more strength and regularity. The infant started feeding again on the second day, taking small amounts at first, then more. He began making soft sounds, not quite cries but musical chirps that Krell said meant contentment in their language. His large eyes started tracking movement and responding to voices. On the third day, Krell finally spoke the question that had clearly been bothering him. His voice was thick with exhaustion and relief and confusion all mixed together. I do not understand what you are doing, Marcus. You are not using any techniques. You are not administering treatments. You are simply being here with him. Marcus looked down at the infant, who was now actively trying to grab his finger with tiny translucent hands. His arms ached from holding the baby for so long, but he refused to put Light of my joy down except when absolutely necessary. Sometimes that is the technique, Ambassador. Just being present. Making sure he knows someone cares about him. That he is not just another patient or diplomatic problem to solve. He is a scared child who needs to know he matters. Krell was quiet for a long moment. In my culture, we pride ourselves on efficiency and achievement. We have protocols for everything. Feeding schedules calculated down to the minute. Development metrics tracked and analyzed. Educational stimulation programs that begin practically from birth. We have become so focused on optimization and results that we forgot something fundamental. He reached out and gently touched his son's glowing cheek. We forgot that before all the schedules and metrics and achievements, a child simply needs to know they are loved. That they are not alone in the universe. Yeah, Marcus said softly. That is pretty universal, I think. Does not matter what planet you are from or what you look like. Kids need to feel safe and connected. Everything else builds on that foundation. By the fourth day, Light of my joy was well enough to leave intensive care. The medical staff ran their final scans and tests, documenting a recovery they could not scientifically explain with their instruments and protocols. The official reports would end up saying spontaneous improvement due to unknown factors. But Marcus knew the truth. Ambassador Krell knew it too. And very soon the entire galaxy would know it as well. The story spread through orbital station Zenith within hours of Light of My Joy's recovery. But this time the story was different. This was not just gossip about some janitor with a lucky touch. This was about a dying child of an extremely rare and influential species being saved when the best medical science available had completely failed. When Ambassador Krell spoke, people across the galaxy listened. And Krell had a lot to say. He demanded an audience with the full station council, the governing body that made all the important decisions. The council chambers filled with representatives from dozens of species, all curious and concerned about what the normally reserved Keltharian ambassador would say. Marcus watched from the public seating area, feeling extremely uncomfortable about being the center of so much attention. Krell had specifically requested that he attend. Krell's testimony was devastating in its simplicity and honesty. He stood before the council holding Light of My Joy, who was now healthy and glowing brightly, and he described everything. How the most advanced medical technology in this sector of space had been completely helpless. How trained specialists with decades of experience and prestigious credentials had failed to save his son. How every protocol and procedure had accomplished absolutely nothing except making things worse. Then a human maintenance worker, someone deemed unqualified and unfit by our credentialing standards, sat with my dying son for 72 hours straight and saved his life. Not with technology. Not with expertise or advanced degrees. With something we have systematically removed from our childcare systems. Compassion. Presence. The simple act of caring. A Vexian counselor stood up, her feathered crest rippling with skepticism. With all due respect, Ambassador, are you actually suggesting we replace trained childcare professionals with janitors? That we ignore centuries of scientific development and return to primitive methods? Krell's voice turned cold. I am suggesting that we have become so obsessed with credentials and protocols and measurable metrics that we have forgotten what children fundamentally need. My son did not require advanced medical intervention. He required someone to hold him and refuse to leave. He required presence and love and the knowledge that he mattered to someone. These are not primitive methods. They are foundational requirements that we have trained ourselves to ignore. Director Charla stood up from her seat, and the entire chamber went quiet. Everyone knew about her reputation, her rigid adherence to proper procedures, her dismissal of the human janitor's interference. She looked directly at Marcus as she spoke, and her voice carried across the room. The ambassador is absolutely correct. When the Kroth cubs of Ambassador Threll cried for hours, I dismissed the human's offer to help because he lacked proper training and certification. I valued my protocols over results. I valued my professional pride over the well-being of children in my care. She paused, and Marcus could see how difficult this admission was for her. I was wrong. Completely and utterly wrong. Murmurs of shock rippled through the assembly. A facility director publicly admitting failure was almost unheard of in these formal proceedings. Tom, the Kroth caretaker who had been there that first night, stepped forward to speak. With the council's permission, I would like to present our research findings. After the incident with the cubs, several of us began studying human childcare methods and comparing them to our standard approaches. We discovered something remarkable. Humans have spent thousands of years developing techniques based not on efficiency or optimization, but on emotional connection and bonding. Rocking, singing, maintaining physical presence. These are not primitive or outdated. They address fundamental developmental needs that exist across many species. A Zenti researcher activated the holographic displays, filling the air with charts and data. We conducted a careful study over the past 2 weeks with proper controls but not everyone was convinced. Another counselor stood up, his voice sharp with skepticism. This is anecdotal evidence at best. One human got lucky with a handful of children. This hardly justifies throwing out established scientific protocols that have been developed and refined over centuries. Where are the long-term studies? Where is the peer-reviewed research? Ambassador Krell's translator could barely contain his anger. My son was dying. Your established scientific protocols were killing him through systematic isolation and sterile procedures. You can discuss your long-term studies and peer reviews while children suffer, or you can acknowledge a simple truth. Every species in this chamber has children. Every species has struggled with young ones who will not eat or sleep, who cry without apparent cause. We have accepted this suffering as normal because our protocols tell us it is just an adjustment period or developmental phase. But what if it is not normal? What if our children suffer unnecessarily because we have prioritized systems and credentials over basic emotional needs? The debate continued for hours. Some counselors argued passionately for maintaining current standards and conducting more research before changing anything. Others proposed creating committees to study the issue and develop new protocols that might incorporate some human methods. Through it all, Marcus sat quietly, wishing he could just disappear back to his mop bucket and cleaning cart where things were simple. Finally, Controller Vex spoke, his translated voice cutting through all the arguments. This council has heard extensive testimony regarding Marcus Webb's unconventional but demonstrably effective approaches to childcare across multiple species. I propose we create an entirely new position within our station structure. Interspecies Comfort Specialist. This role would work alongside our trained caretakers and medical staff, providing the emotional and compassionate care that our current protocols may be overlooking or eliminating. Director Sharla spoke again, her voice thoughtful. And I suppose this human would fill this new position? Given his complete lack of formal credentials or training. If he chooses to accept it. Vex's compound eyes focused directly on Marcus. Mr. Webb, would you be willing to transition from maintenance work to this new specialized role? The compensation would be substantially higher, grade 7 instead of grade 3, and you would have unrestricted access to all childcare and medical facilities on this station. Marcus stood slowly, feeling hundreds of alien eyes watching him from all directions. Controller Vex, members of the council, I am honored. Truly. But I feel like I need to be honest here. I am not a trained professional in anything except mopping floors. I do not have degrees in biology or child development or xenopsychology. I do not have certifications or credentials. I just do what feels right in the moment. Ambassador Krell stood, holding his healthy, glowing son. Light of my joy's bioluminescent patterns pulsed contentedly. You have something far more valuable than credentials, Marcus Webb. You have the ability to see children as children first, regardless of their species or diplomatic importance. You recognize that beneath all our biological differences and cultural practices, the young of every species need fundamentally the same things. Safety, presence, connection, and love. These cannot be taught in any university or certification program. Tom stepped forward again. I would like to volunteer as well. To learn these methods properly and help teach them to other caretakers throughout the station. I have all the required credentials and training, but Marcus has shown me that I was missing the most important element of caring for children. Lisa, the younger Croft caretaker, raised her paw. I volunteer also. The human showed us that caring for children is not about following perfect protocols like machines. It is about genuine connection and compassion. One by one, caretakers from different species throughout the chamber stood up, requesting training in what they were calling human nurturing techniques. The movement spread like ripples across water, first through the station staff, then outward as word traveled through diplomatic channels to home worlds scattered across known space. Within weeks, Marcus went from being a night shift janitor to leading workshops attended by childcare professionals from dozens of different planets. He taught them to rock and hum, to maintain comforting physical presence, to observe what each individual child needed instead of blindly following species-wide protocols. But most importantly, he taught them to lead with genuine compassion and caring. The techniques are not magic, Marcus explained to a workshop group of 30 caretakers from various species. Rocking works because it mimics the movement infants experience before birth. Humming works because steady rhythm is naturally soothing to developing brains. Eye contact works because it communicates I see you, you are not invisible. But none of these techniques matter at all if you do not genuinely care. Children can absolutely feel the difference between someone mechanically going through motions and someone who truly wants them to feel safe and loved. The station's reputation transformed completely. It became known throughout the galaxy as the place where children of all species thrived, where diplomatic families could bring their young without fear or worry. Ambassador Krell became a passionate advocate for reforming childcare practices across the entire alliance. Director Sharla, deeply humbled by her experience, worked directly alongside Marcus to develop new protocols that balance safety and health with emotional well-being and connection. 6 months after saving Light of My Joy, Marcus received a video message from his sister back on Earth. The recording showed his nephew, now 3 years old, playing enthusiastically with toy spaceships on the floor. Marcus, your nephew wants to know when Uncle Marcus is coming home to visit, his sister said with a warm smile. But I explained that you are way too busy now taking care of all the space babies up there. Marcus recorded his reply sitting in his small but comfortable office, which had replaced his old janitor's storage locker. Through the window behind him, the childcare facility was visible. Tom was gently rocking a Vexian hatchling while Lisa sang softly to a pair of Croth cubs. Tell him Uncle Marcus misses him more than anything. But yeah, I am taking care of space babies now, and you know what I learned? Kids are pretty much the same everywhere in the universe. Human, alien, whatever. They all just need to know someone cares about them. That is the one truly universal language that exists. And I am grateful every single day that Grandma taught me how to speak it.